Hi, everybody. It's Brad Truax here from Eastman Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. It's September 2024, and we're going to be talking about moose today. Moose, obviously, the male moose is known as the bull moose, the female is known as a cow, and the offspring are known as calves. Moose are basically northern animals. They're found in North America and in northern Europe and Asia. Canada actually has the highest moose population. And of the contiguous states in the U.S., Maine has the most moose. Maine actually has about 75,000 moose. New Hampshire only has 3,000 to 4,000 moose. Vermont, about 2,000 moose. And a typical moose range is about 5 to 50 square miles for the bulls, and it's smaller for females. Moose almost disappeared entirely in New Hampshire in the 1800s, and that was due to extensive deforestation that destroyed their habitat. And that was mostly because the forests were destroyed to make farmland. But as the farmlands were abandoned, new forests began to grow. And that's actually good for moose. Moose actually need those young forests for foraging purposes. Eastman's forest is very mature at this time, so maybe the fact that newer growth is needed for the moose makes our forest somewhat less optimal for them. The moose population in New Hampshire peaked in the late 1990s at about 7,500, but now it's down to 3,500 to 4,000. And moose are more numerous in the northern part of the state, what's often referenced as the North Country. Moose are the tallest animals in North America, and by weight and mass, only bisons are larger. An adult moose can stand up to almost 7 feet at the shoulder height, and the males normally weigh anywhere from 800 to 1,500 pounds, and the females typically 400 to 1,000 pounds. So again, a big bull moose can weigh well over half a ton. And the antlers of a mature bull are between 4 feet and 6 feet wide. The coat of the moose has a top layer of long hairs and a soft, woolly undercoat. And the guard hairs are hollow, and that's important because they're filled with air. That provides good insulation for them. And interestingly, it also helps keep them afloat when swimming. Moose are ungulates, hooved animals, and their long legs allow them to walk through deep snow or run at very high speeds, even over rough terrain. They can run at speeds up to 35 miles an hour. They're also excellent swimmers, and they're diurnal, although they're also particularly active around dusk at night. And they're usually solitary, though the cows will bond with their calves. So, what do moose eat? Moose are herbivores, which I find particularly striking that an animal this huge would not rely on eating meat. Moose lack upper front teeth. They have 6 pairs of large flat molars and 6 pairs of premolars that they use to grind up their food. They have a large distinctive proboscis, that's their nose. And interestingly, it features nostrils that can be sealed shut when the moose is browsing for aquatic vegetation. Their diet consists of plants and fruits. Much of their diet consists of plants that are not grasses, but fresh shoots from trees such as willow and birch. And unfortunately, those terrestrial plants are low in sodium. So, as much as half of the moose's diet consists of aquatic plants, and that would be things like lilies and pondweeds. They're much lower in energy content than the terrestrial plants, but they're much higher in sodium content. Sodium is extremely important for the moose. And in winter and spring, we'll often see moose at the side of roads licking salt that have been used to spread on icy roads over the winter. So again, moose require a habitat that has adequate edible plants. So again, pond grasses, young trees, and shrubs. The habitat must provide some cover from predators and protection from extremely hot and cold weather. They also require access to mineral lakes, safe places for calving, and especially those aquatic feeding sites. So moose will travel among different habitats with the seasons to address those requirements. And as a result, the moose's territory can range from 5 to 50 square miles, a little bit less for a female. And they have excellent cold tolerance, but very poor heat tolerance. And moose survive hot weather by either going in the shade or a cooling wind, or by immersion in cool water. So you may find them wading in cool water. Moose are fast. They can run up to 35 miles an hour. Here's a moose chasing a skier down a ski slope at Jackson Hole. Incredibly fast. And again, moose can run up to 35 miles an hour. They can run even in water. So here's a moose. That's the bull moose. There's a cow and a calf. And again, this bull moose is going to chase that cow. So look how those long legs allow the moose to run fast, even in the water. It must be a much easier way to catch the girl of your dreams. Moose are also good swimmers. They can swim up to 6 miles an hour, and they're said to be able to swim long distances, up to 10 miles. And interestingly, they can dive up to 20 feet down and hold their breath for a minute. And that's particularly important because when the weather turns colder, they can eat underwater plants that other animals can't reach. So here's a moose swimming. Look at this moose that weighs probably over half a ton, able to swim, moving up and down, very powerful legs, and their hooves are like paddles. And again, we mentioned previously that their hair has hollow parts that help them float. So moose actually have four good reasons to swim. Main one is that they feed on aquatic plants, and many of those are underwater. But they may also need to cross rivers, lakes, or streams in their quest for food, a better habitat, or a mate. And they may also have to swim to escape predators like a pack of wolves. And they often swim simply to cool off, particularly on hot summer days or during fly season. And those long legs that they have help propel them in the water. Their hooves can also act like paddles, and they have these specialized nasal muscles that close their nostrils that allow them to go underwater for periods to eat aquatic plants. And those hollow hairs in their coat actually help keep them buoyant. So again, moose like to wade in the water on hot days in order to cool off, and their long legs allow them to wade in moderately deep water and help them swim in real deep water. So those long legs are important. The moose can stand up to 7 feet tall, and those long legs are longer in the front than the rear. And the long legs help them browse on trees that are higher than other animals can browse on. So deer can't get to some of the plants that are higher up, but the moose can because of those long legs. Those long legs help them move easily through deep snow, helps them wade in moderately deep water, helps them jump or run over obstacles to escape predators like wolves, and helps them swim in deep water. Moose are ungulates, meaning they have hooves. And note the big dew claws. These are dew claws on the back of the feet. And when they're out in deep snow or soft mud, these dew claws may actually touch the ground and their hooves can splay out. And that combination actually helps support the moose's weight, almost acting like snowshoes, and helps prevent them from sinking in the snow or the mud. And those big hooves also act like paddles when the moose is swimming. The bull moose has antlers, and that set of antlers can be huge, up to 6 feet wide. The antlers get bigger each year until the moose reaches his prime, So you can actually tell the relative age of a moose by the size of its antlers. And note there's velvet, a highly vascularized substance that covers the antlers. And by September, that velvet dries and falls off. What's the function of the antlers? Basically, there's only one function. It's fighting for a mate. And sometimes simply the size of the antlers makes them so formidable that they don't actually have to fight. And the antlers are shed after the mating season. Moose also have this hump in the back. So what's that hump for? Well, it's not for storing fat like a camel's hump. Rather, that hump simply is caused by the massive shoulder muscles that the moose has. So the rut occurs in September and October. That's when the females enter estrus, and bulls will stop eating for 2 weeks during that rutting season, and they'll mate with as many cows as they can find. Both sexes call each other. The females use a wailing call, and the males make deep grunting sounds that can be heard as far as 1,600 feet away. And the bulls do compete for the females, often fighting with their antlers for dominance. And the gestation period is about 8 months and usually bears a single calf, or if food is plentiful, they may have twins. And the calves are usually born in May or June. And the calves have a more reddish color than the adults. And the calves will stay with their mother until just before the next set of calves are born. This is showing the moose calves. Again, they can either be single or twins, and they're born in May or June. They have a reddish color to their coats. And again, they're going to stay with mom until just before the next set of young are born. Average lifespan of a moose is about 15 to 25 years. That's pretty long for most wildlife, and it probably is because there's a relative paucity of predators. However, in New England, the moose population has been declining significantly due to winter ticks and a brain parasite. Hunting of moose has been limited in New England due to that declining population. Are there predators in the moose? Well, there are really only two natural predators. In North America, that would be the wolf. In Eurasia, it would be the Siberian tiger. But young moose calves can also be preyed upon by grizzly bears, cougars, or wolverines. And in some areas, moose are the primary source of food for wolves. Wolves may hunt them in packs, and again, the cow and the calves are most vulnerable. And of course, humans are a big predator of the moose, either by hunters or motor vehicles. There are two significant factors contributing to the decline of moose in New England. In the northern parts, they often die from a brain parasite. That brain parasite is a worm, a brain worm, and the deer serve as vectors. What that means is that the deers carry the parasite, but they're not affected by the parasite. They're basically asymptomatic. So the moose population and the deer population are usually inversely related, meaning that if you have more deer, there are going to be fewer moose and vice versa. And in the southern parts of New England, moose die from winter tick infestations, which we'll talk about in a minute. And both the brainworm and the winter ticks have led to this declining birth rates of moose and increased mortality in the calves. And of course, moose also die from hunting and motor vehicle accidents, but most of the decline that we've seen in the moose population in New England has been due to these two infestations, i.e. the brain parasite and the winter ticks. So what are winter ticks? They're the biggest reason for the declining moose population. And winter ticks are different from the types of ticks that affect humans. Basically, tens of thousands of winter ticks may infest a moose. And a moose with a high tick load can lose 25 to 30% of their body weight during the winter. And that's mainly because they spend their time standing, scratching, and grooming themselves, trying to get rid of these ticks. And they often lose so much blood from the tick bites that they actually become anemic and malnourished. And our warmer, longer falls give ticks the opportunity to latch on before cold sets in. This is actually showing a moose bed that has some blood patches. and that's bleeding that was actually due to the winter tick infestations. A moose can harbor 35,000 to 70,000 winter ticks. This is showing a cow that's lost almost all of her hair due to the winter tick infestation. And in some years, more than 50% of moose calves died during winter due to these infestations. In Maine, during the winter of 2021 to 2022, over 90% of moose calves that were being tracked actually died. And the infestations also suppress reproduction in the adult moose. So winter ticks actually seek out moose, and this starts in October. The winter ticks are doing what's called questing. That's basically searching for a host, and they actually quest in teams of 1,000 or more. They actually interlock their limbs. So if one tick grabs onto a passerby, they all climb on board. And the ticks, like actually any warm-blooded host, but moose are kind of the ideal host, and that's because moose lack a grooming instinct. But more importantly, they have this great thick 8-inch coat that keeps the ticks nice and warm. April is the mortality month for infested moose, and the carcasses are often very emaciated, nearly bald, and they be covered in as many as 70,000 ticks. So there are a number of factors contributing to a high number of winter ticks. One is a high moose density, and early snow melt in late winter or early spring allows them to survive longer. And periods of long summer drought allow survival of the tick eggs. And relatively warm fall and early winter temperatures with relatively little snow corresponds with the questing period for the tick larvae. And that's probably the most important factor contributing to it. Remember, in climate change, here in New England and New Hampshire, we have 5 to 10 fewer days of snow cover since 2000. And our winters are warming faster than in other parts of the US. So climate change is contributing significantly to winter tick infestations in the moose. So it's certainly no surprise that winter ticks are going to be increasing in New England due to climate change. Current attempts to reduce winter ticks have been futile. A number of approaches have been tried: pesticides, biopesticides like fungal pathogens, genetic engineering, creating more habitat to reduce the number of moose per square mile, and hunting to cull the moose population. The theory behind culling is that during moose breeding season, which coincides with the winter tick questing, there's increased movement of the moose and there's higher density of the moose. So that increases the chances that a moose will pick up and spread winter ticks. So a little bit of good news, winter ticks in Maine that plague juvenile moose were at their lowest levels last year for a long time. It actually was the second year in a row that tick counts in moose were relatively low. The Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife puts radio collars on young moose, and they've been doing that for the last 11 years. And they take blood and hair samples, checking for winter ticks, and examine the overall health of the animals. And last year, the moose calves were bigger than usual, and they attributed that to fewer winter ticks and being more active due to less snow. And being heavier gives the calves a better chance of surviving winter ticks. But here's the kicker. If you have more moose, that also means you're going to have more ticks. So you get in this vicious cycle where more moose, more ticks, then more ticks, more moose die. It takes a moose cow about 7 years to replace herself with offspring, and that's 5 years longer than it takes a deer to replace herself. Moose at Eastman, Rick Karish provided this video last year. It shows a moose taking a leisurely stroll here at Eastman. Maybe the moose is about to take a swim in the lake. We probably have a moose sighting at Eastman about once a year. And I had a moose here in my backyard 10 years ago when we first moved to Eastman. But as we were putting together this presentation, I was actually lamenting the fact that I hadn't actually seen another moose since that time. And just then, this happened. An incredible video on a game cam of a moose. This was off Longwood Drive at Eastman, happened just a couple days ago. What great timing. So where are you likely to see a moose? Well, you ought to be looking at the edge of wetlands, ponds, lakes, or streams. And remember, that's because moose like to eat aquatic plants. On a hot day, you might see one cooling off in the water, and you might see them at roadsides licking salt that have been spread over the winter. So particularly in the springtime, they're often at the roadsides. And you might simply see one while you're hiking in the woods. But remember, you're more likely to see a moose in the northern parts of New Hampshire. Moose tracks are the largest of the ungulates. These are moose tracks over here compared to deer tracks. Now, remember, with the deer tracks, you often see a small print from the dew claw. Occasionally, you might see a dew claw print from the hoof of a moose. And again, deer tracks tend to be a bit more curved than moose tracks. This is showing a moose track in the mud. Here's moose tracks in the snow. Here's a moose track that in that video I just showed you of the moose a couple days ago at Eastman, left this moose track in the mud and the gravel. Moose scat, again, appears as firm, dark pellets. They're about twice the size of deer pellets and about 4 times the size of rabbit pellets. So again, here you have, on the left, you have deer scat. On the right, you have moose scat. So moose scat is considerably bigger than deer scat. Moose and humans, moose seldom attack humans, but they can be aggressive if they're provoked or frightened. So again, if you harass them or startle them, or sometimes the presence of a dog will lead to a moose charging. And unlike other large hoofed animals like horses, keep in mind that a moose can kick in all directions, including sideways. So again, moose are particularly dangerous if they're kicking at you. And we've all seen the videos of the moose running down a ski hill after a skier. But moose can often show aggression to other animals as well, particularly predators. Actually, in Alaska, you're more likely to be injured by a moose than a bear. And that's largely because moose outnumber bears 3 to 1. And they injure 5 to 10 people each year, mostly in motor vehicle accidents. And if you're threatened by a moose, run, get behind something solid like a tree. Moose are usually docile and not a threat, but beware that they could harm you. Be especially aware of the season. I mentioned when we first moved here in 2014 to Eastman, a female moose passed through our yard. So we ran out to try to get a video or a photo of the moose as she was crossing onto the golf course. Suddenly we realized what season it was. It was the rut season, and she might be running from a bull moose. So we hightailed it back into our house. Fortunately, no bull moose was following. But if you do see a moose, you need to know what to do. The New York Times recently had an article on what to do if you encounter a moose. Again, signs that a moose might attack would be ears down against the head, hair up on the neck and the back, eyes bulging, and especially tongue out and licking their lips. That's actually how they collect scent. And that's actually the most ominous sign. So get behind a tree or a rock or some other sort of obstruction. And if you do fall to the ground, curl up in a ball and protect your head with your hands and hold perfectly still. Don't move or try to get up until the moose has moved a safe distance away or it might renew its attack. Pretty good advice. Moose and motor vehicles don't mix. There were 45 collisions in New Hampshire last year between a moose and a motor vehicle. And in the last 5 years, the state's averaged 68 collisions per year. That's actually down from prior to 2020 when there were an average of 96 collisions per year. And moose often come to the sides of the roads to lick salt, we've already mentioned. And moose are so tall that serious injuries or death can happen to the vehicle occupants when there's an accident with a moose. And this was a video taken from a camera that somebody had in the front of their car, showing a moose and a calf. So again, New Hampshire Fish and Game notes that moose and vehicle collisions can happen on any type of roads in the state. And those collisions are most often between May through October. Remember, they particularly like the side of the road to lick salt, particularly in the spring months. And they're also more likely to cross roadways during the rut, which occurs again in September or October. So now is the time that moose accidents may be more common. And though collisions can happen any time of day, they actually occur most frequently at dusk or at night. And remember, moose are dark brown, so they're very hard to see against the pavement, especially at night. And interestingly, don't look for eye shine, as opposed to deer or other animals that may look at your headlights and reflect them. Moose don't always look at an approaching vehicle. So again, if you see moose crossing signs, those indicate where moose may have crossed in the past. So be particularly attentive and drive slowly where those signs are. But remember, moose can cross the road anywhere they like. And they're more likely to cross roadways during the rut. So again, September and October, now is the time that they may tend to be crossing. And they often come to the sides of those roads to lick salt, particularly in springtime. So brake for moose, it could save your life. This is showing a sticker that is often put on bumpers of cars. New Hampshire Fish and Game has these recommendations for drivers to reduce your chance of a collision or the severity of an injury to an occupant if you do hit a moose. Don't drive at high speeds, wear your seatbelt, scan the sides of the road, be able to stop within the zone of your headlights, and use your high beams wherever possible. And if you do see a moose, slow down or stop until you've passed it or it's left the road. In fact, don't count on the moose stopping when they see you. They're very unpredictable. So stop the car if necessary and wait. Moose hunting season in New Hampshire this year is from October 19th to the 27th. And only those hunters that won a special lottery can hunt moose. But we issue this as a caution to hikers. If you're out hiking during moose season, make sure that you wear blaze orange. So here you see a hiker, two hikers wearing blaze orange vests, and even the dog has a blaze orange vest on. So what about the future in moose? We're likely to see fewer moose in New Hampshire in future years. Climate change is going to cause some northward migration of moose to colder regions. And again, the winter tick problem is likely to worsen as climate change causes shorter winters here. And hopefully that moose on your license plate won't be the last one you see. We're going to miss seeing this majestic animal. So again, that's more about moose. I hope you've enjoyed this.